how to talk to women. I'm Diana Pham. My handle is Diana's Oyster on Twitter, and I'm a developer advocate at Vonage. So a lot of you here, when I told a couple people that I was doing this talk, they were like, "Oh, is this how you get girls in DevRel?" And I was like, "No, not exactly." So I actually asked quite a few of my girlfriends from, DevRel tech space on Twitter to send me DMs that they've received, and these are just some highlights that I got. So you can kind of, pick out your favorites. Might surprise some of you that none of these actually worked out for the guys who sent these. But yeah, I don't know, what's my favorite? Like, marry me, or do you want a baby boy? You like the fourth one? Yeah, okay. Yeah, can you hide me behind your eyelids? Could I stay in your eyes just like Cole? Like, who's Cole? Yeah. Oh, this is like my favorite actually. Send feet, bobs, and vegana. Just kidding, your tweet showed up in my timeline and that's what I imagined happening. I don't even know what that means. Alright, so today I'm going to go over a couple things. First, we're going to recognize the problem. Second, I'll go over, microaggressions, how to make no an easy option for people, how to become a lifeline, and being an advocate. So for starters, recognizing the problem. One incident that really inspired my talk was one time I was at a conference and, me being lovely me, was talking in a group, and this man joined our group, and immediately I was like, "Hi, I'm Diana." And so he was just talking to all of us, and one of my friends, who was also a girl in the group, she was trying to get me away from this person, and I didn't quite understand. And later I realized that she told me this guy did not acknowledge a single woman until you introduced yourself. And I was like, oh my god, I didn't even realize that was a thing. And so it just made me more self-aware and just looking out for similar incidences, and I really wanted to share that with other people. So these are just a few things that actually happen, and it's just from what other women have shared with me. For example, some companies have really bratty cultures, and so one of my friends here, oh my gosh, hello. I'm just gonna read it out. But bratty culture. Oh, it works. Okay, let's look at it. Okay, we're gonna look up the screen now. So, bratty culture. I already had a different coworker and an exec hit on me on 2 separate occasions, and I haven't even hit the year mark. It's a very bratty culture. I'm just here for the experience, network, comp, and promotion and opportunity. And I thought that was just extremely sad to hear from one of my friends, because that's just something that happens, Another thing is some women get discouraged to take parental leave. So a tech lead told me that women deserve to be paid less than men because women take time off for parental leave and therefore have less experience than men overall. Again, super crappy thing to say. So this is something that one of my girlfriends got, just an example of misogyny. So, Jan, your post made me cringe. You're more concerned of the image of being a girl developer rather than actually being a developer. You won't last long in this field, guaranteed. And ironically, my friend here, rarely posts about herself, actually. She's constantly posting tech content, and this is the kind of messages that she gets. So, one of my confessions is the worst tech job experiences that I've had were always with a team full of women. So I'm not going to say that all women are really empowering and all that, because that hasn't been the case for me. And I realized that when I'm in a situation like this, I really had to dig deep and have some empathy for them, because not that that's okay. I've dealt with a lot of women who really, really put me down in these roles, and I realized oh, this is a power move, because they've just not had the opportunity, and they constantly have to feel like they have to prove themselves, and so sometimes as a result they'll put other people down to make them feel like they're doing something right, and I think that's really unfortunate. Second confession is that I have had really rude misogynistic classmates who really doubt my ability to be a technical person. And I've handed my phone to a male engineer in the past who pretty much debated a technical decision that I made. And that person was very not receptive to quote unquote me. But when another guy was to bring up the same idea, I noticed that they were very receptive. Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I'm dude, I said the exact same thing. So just another thing that happens. So Just some action items on how to recognize problems. So first and foremost, ask your colleagues about their experiences. And I realized that this is something that I wish I did more in the past because, you know, women go through a lot and not everyone really talks about it. Secondly, notice how people interact with women at your next event. No, not at all. Not at all have I had this issue in this conference, and I'm really grateful. But just for future reference, that's just something to think about. And third, acknowledge women. So secondly, avoid microaggressions. Let's start off by defining microaggressions. So microaggressions is a term used for statements, whether they're intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative attitudes towards stigmatized or culturally marginalized groups. And here are just a few examples that I got from my friends. So they've been told, one day you'll be a good software engineer, even though she's a brilliant software engineer who actually got mentioned multiple times throughout this day in other people's talks. I know you're trying to do all the hard projects because you are trying to prove yourself as a minority, which is a really weird thing to say. I don't even know how you got this job without a degree. Honestly, I'm impressed. And it's just a very backhanded compliment. This word one is actually something that I get pretty often, and I have no problem with people asking me if I'm in marketing. It's more so of when there are other engineers at a conference who are also boozing, and rather than asking oh, what's your role in the company, they automatically assume that I'm in marketing. And I'm like, if you're able to be technical and running a booth, then why can't I? So this is just another example. As an ex-Oracle consultant, seeing a fit/hot Oracle developer is so confusing to me, but awesome. And then would not recommend. So how to avoid microaggressions? First off, just give genuine compliments. So think can this come off offensive in any way, whether that's prejudice, racist, sexist, anything is. And if yes, then don't say it. And third, don't assume anyone's role. So number 3 is make no an easy option. Number 3, make no an easy option. So when I was researching this, I noticed that pretty much all the results were related to how to politely say no, or just how to say no to people. And I think there should be more information on how people can help other people feel comfortable to say no. So this was something that one of my friends sent me. I hate it when you're having a conversation about something technical and interesting, and you're excited about these ideas and discussions. And the next thing you know, there's a hand on your waist or your back. It's so demotivating to have those experiences devalued and turned into yet another creepy, unwanted sexual advance. And I thought this was really sad because I learned that my friend's initial reaction wasn't how do I make them stop? It was self-doubt. And she said, maybe my ideas aren't that interesting and people only pretend to listen because they think they might get laid. So, yeah. Next, I was in a conference and there were many notable speakers. One particular speaker started talking a little too much with me. We were in a round table discussion and he started texting me on LinkedIn asking when do we leave, if I'm getting bored, and more, while giving creepy looks across the room. The next day he comes up to me and asks what's my Instagram, so he made me follow him there. And I've heard this similar story far too many times, where women feel pressure to follow people back when they don't want to, and often it's by really creepy people who they don't want to see their content. So, how to make no an easy option for people. First, don't touch people weirdly, so they won't have to even say no. Hello, you're at work, so it's kind of weird. Secondly, there are some people who just don't take no well, and I think it's really important to recognize that just because you might take no well doesn't mean that other people will, and so just have that kind of empathy when you see that this woman or whoever it is has trouble rejecting you. So, yeah. And third, offer ways of staying in touch and perhaps, offer your social media platforms first. So you can say, would you like to stay in touch or connect? And then say, oh, I'm on these things, rather than being follow me on Instagram, because that's just really aggressive and, yeah, a little weird. And fourth, be a lifeline. So when I say this, when I say be a lifeline, the subtext is look out for your colleagues. And I have a really bad example of that, where one of my friends was yeah, my coworker actually randomly came up to me and said this. I have a creepy story. One of my coworkers gave me this heads up out of the blue at the booth at QCon. All these guys, or all these dudes are making of you in their heads right now. And that's a really bad example of being there for your coworker. So I think that there are definitely better alternatives, which is one that my coworker gave me. And he said hey, I noticed those guys from company X keep following you around, let me know if they give you any trouble. And I think that's a much better alternative than whatever this guy said. And moving on. So Leanne Lee, she's awesome. She gave me permission to share this. And she tweeted, if you've ever wondered why a lot of women don't feel safe at conferences. I'm at the after party in the venue, around about 1K people around me. Some guy who I spoke to for 10 minutes just comes up to me to tell me I want every part of her body. Sometimes being a lifeline just means being a good listener. And as someone who's taking kickboxing, and I carry my pepper spray around, and I've told people that I can protect them with my pepper spray. It's hot pink. Yeah, not really. But even then, I've learned that there's no amount of mental preparation that will help me to quickly process these incidences when they happen. So sometimes when these things happen, we just need someone to listen and not tell us what we should have done or could have done. And, yeah. So here, how to be a lifeline. Let them know that you're there to support them, and look out for them when there's a creepy person around. My coworker actually told me oh, this guy, he's only talking to women, or oh, he's definitely targeting such and such, and it just gives me good insight to not be around that person. Don't question a cry for help. There's actually been a time where I was being creeped on by someone, and I came up to someone I barely knew and was hi, can you please pretend that you know me right now? And the person was yeah, sure. So there are incidences where that's gonna happen, and I didn't think that I would ever be that person, but I was. So just something to look out for. And lastly, don't tell them what they should have done. Just listen. I don't know what it is, but whenever something like this happens, a lot of people tend to think that oh, you're seeking advice, and it's often unsolicited. So don't do that. And lastly, be an advocate. So my coworker here, his name's Michael. He and I often speak together, and he's always listening to me as a main speaker. And there was one time where we got our badges, or I got my badge mixed up, and they didn't put me down as a speaker. And he was a bit upset about this and was no, you need to switch out your badge. And I was why? And it turns out it was never about the badge. It was about making sure that people saw us as equals, because we were both doing the talk and we both put in the work to do it. So in that way, he was definitely an advocate for me. And manels, I would think they're outdated by now, but they're not. So my coworker Jim, he actually mentioned oh, I would be too embarrassed and pull out from speaking immediately if I was ever part of that. So lastly, or just going over, how to be an advocate. First of all, don't be creepy. For some reason, that's really hard for some people. Yeah. Don't overlook details, like I mentioned. It's such a small thing, the whole badge situation, but my coworker was no, you're definitely getting the right badge because that's important to me. I was cool. Avoid speaking on manels. I'm not saying you absolutely should not, cannot, but the same. Call people out if you do feel comfortable doing that in a very civil way, and show up for women in tech. And I feel a lot of people here have definitely done that, so thank you so much. And just to recap, action items. So recognize the problem, avoid microaggressions, make no an easy option, be a lifeline, and be an advocate. And I know that a lot of these action items sound very defensive, but really it's not about being protected, or at least that's not the case for me. It's about feeling supported. And I hope that if there's anything that you got from my talk, it's how to support women in tech. So yeah.